Greetings, Gold Universe. I don't even know if I ever told you that you're the Gold Universe. Yeah, we have different colors for universes, and which are different classes. And we don't compete class to class, but we do compete within our own Gold Universe. So our teams with red, blue, yellow, green, and purple are part of the Gold Universe. So the reason I bring that up is because I cycle the results for every one of these recap videos. You can look at the past results, but then I archive them for future teams. And also when I do YouTube, some people really want to get ahead and look at decision 2, 3, 4, and 5 before they get there to plan their strategy according to some of the things that happened with other teams in the past, which is like, the learning curve helps with the learning curve. So this is the recap for decision 3 and a preparation for decision 4. And let me share my screen and we'll go to our website. Let's get rid of this here. And we're going to, you can see that, we're going to biz485.com, www.businessbiz485.com for the class. And why I mentioned gold is this is our decision 3 gallery. This is our last gallery. I've archived the past class. I've got another class starting that will archive on a different page with a different extension. But this is for our decision 3. And we will go to the gallery now. Now, I'm going to not take a lot of time analyzing the whole gallery here. I'm leaving a lot more here for you and your CFOs and your teams to meet to look at many, many different other images that will help you, especially not only decision 4 and decision, we're winding it up in decision 5, but also especially the papers that are coming up and the peer reviews that are coming up, the final decisions, the drafts for the paper for the presentation, and then the presentation. These graphics are going to help you a lot to explain what happened in the universe, what happened in your team and with the other teams. And when you're asked for financials in one of the rubrics for the papers, etc., you can use these exhibits. And it can also help with your logic in deciding what happened. I'll focus on a few kind of things like that to show you how we look at it and evaluate it, just to give you some tips and hints on it. But we, as you probably saw with going over the results, there's really 3 places, and it's red is ahead by a jump. They jumped up a little this time, which is great. But then green, yellow, and blue are just really in a dead heat with 18, 19, 19 in terms of total points. So we'll see the standings and how they relate to our favorites, which are EBIT, ROS, and I get my ROS hat on, I think, yeah. And the loss orders over inventory, which is a very key measure of seeing what's going on and balancing supply and demand. So we've got all the LOIs by all the different car lines here. I showed you some of my notes to show you how we kind of look at some of the more advanced things uh, from the instructor viewpoint, what we're looking to see in terms of bias versus noise and some of that statistical stuff. And then we have some things on effective engineering, and you can look at what happened, what happened trend-wise, what happened with decisions that changed our trajectory as well as our results. And then we got a lot of good financials for you this time and for your future papers and a few other things happening as we wrap up the course so that you can include these with your presentations. We've got our primary sort of what were the results exhibits and that kind of stuff. And then the more detailed market indicators. And if you want any more of these or anything different, just text me, message me on Halo, and I'm happy to provide additional. We have all kinds of stuff for each team that I'm happy if you have any other questions about what's going on. Our primary, as we look at what has changed, um, we can also look at loss overs or orders over inventory in addition to EBIT and some of those key indicators. But what we'll see in the financials is that, well, first of all, purple got off to a rough start with the loan and the cash flow. And the lesson from purple and for purple, they actually turned the curve up a little and did really great on a couple of lines in terms of lost orders over inventory. We'll see that when we look at best practices. And they also stopped the bleeding and kind of got the trend of the curve a couple places. They did do a little worse in terms of where they got hit with eco, and we'll see what happened there in terms of the decisions and the ability to kind of stem the tide and maybe turn it around to a positive. Still doing purple, still really doing well in low cost. We'll see that low cost, that green got kind of hit hard. But yellow, who's just doing absolutely great. And remember, green, yellow, and blue are dead heat per second, and they're not that far from red. We're looking at 18, but red did jump. Red was at 10 or 11. The lower, the better in terms of the 6 indicators and where you are, number 2 and 1, 2 and 3, and we'll take a quick look at that. But everyone's doing really well. What has happened with there's something that's new, and it's kind of at the doctoral level, MBA, real advanced level of CFOs in manufacturing businesses, and that is it's been known for a long time, but never really understood because of accounting, and that is the relationship between capital allocation and cash. And people would think like, well, capital allocation, that's long-term stuff, building CapEx, PP&E, getting a supply ready for demand. And remember, each one of these is a year, so you're doing 5 years worth of work. And to start out with a very hurtful company, we started out here with a company that was in trouble, like Sam's Club, and we have to turn it around. It's a turnaround. So for purple, the initial decision you make crunches your cash. And we saw that in decision one. There were some decisions made that said, wow, we're burning up cash on the supply side and building demand, and then our LOI isn't matching. Our orders and our sales are not matching. So then you got to throw more money at the problem. This is what happened somewhat in eco with purple this time, where this got lengthened, and you'll see that in lost orders, although they did really well in low cost in terms of being real close to zero on supply versus demand. So, but you're fighting kind of an uphill battle when you've lost that cash, because capital allocation happens in terms of your ROCE, return on capital employed. And a lot of times people say, hey, we're talking balance sheet. What's that got to do with EBIT, and what's that got to do with the performance of the capital versus the actual return on the capital employed, and then the discounted cash flows? That I don't see that link. Well, what they found recently, look at a book, one of the newer books, graduate level book, is capital allocation. It's just tons of math and all kinds of Markov processes and cool statistical stuff. But really what it comes down to is, wow, they're realizing how closely cash is tied to capital allocation, and they're finding out a lot of accounting tricks and a lot of things that, because of quarterly capitalism, having to make the quarter, disguise the how close cash and capital allocation are. So as hard as Purple's trying, and they're really one of our best teams in terms of cohesiveness with teams and really doing good teamwork, they had a very tough start because of the cash position, and that affects capital allocation. So you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get some supply built up. This demand, I've got a terrible LOI. I got a ton of demand. I'm not meeting it. Then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, I can't. I'm cash constrained. And that's just a simple version of how does DCF work, your cash flows work with return with ROCE. So when we look at the ROCEs and who's doing well, and yellow is obviously doing real well in ROCE because they've had a couple of really good hits here. And our leader, red, I mean, what can you say? There's not a lot of variance, and there's a big difference between bias and noise in terms of variance, and we'll take a closer look at that. This is interesting because you'll see why everyone is so close here. What happens is on all of these different measures, and you can see that Purple's #1 in emissions now. They're the top team here. So they've done a fantastic job ecologically. Also, where's the revenue? Sales revenue, look at #2 in revenue. So what's happened where they've kind of faltered, and I think they jumped up a point, and I think in terms of share price, I think red team might have lost a point. I'm not sure, but doing fantastic. Obviously, number one in ARE, employee morale, and share value. And that is a factor of the others. But the real keys in terms of where they rank this and the ending of the sim are the financials. It's, the revenue versus return on gross and then ARE. And if we look at the actual numbers, we'll see what's going on there a little better. But it's not just is this number one, is this number five, but growth is so important in terms of capital allocation. You'll see that yellow team is number one. And then you'll also see in heavy, strong lines where the LOI is strong for yellow. So that loss orders over inventory, how it ties to EBIT, and then that is where your retained earnings and your return on capital. Now, nobody really ever gets really heavy into positive retained earnings because that takes the whole orchestra playing and to start out with, we're a distressed company. So, but Rose is now positive in 3 of the teams. Let's look. So yeah, let's focus on Rose here since I wear my Rose hat. We try to get into positive territory as much as we can because of the cash problems. Look at that. Purple, even though they're number one in a couple of things and they've really fixed the trends, which we'll see a little bit in a lot of their lines in terms of supply versus demand, they're still getting killed in rows because of cash, and they can see this at the decision level. I don't know this, I haven't talked to them, but you can just tell by the numbers that it's like we tried to change this, we tried to fix this, but we had to make a decision on where the cash should go because we are constrained. And sometimes the strategy, hint, hint, tip, tip, as you get to decision 4 and 5, is that you got to shut down a line. You got to say, I'm bleeding so much here. I'm going to pay the depreciation. I'm not going to do a lot of more supply, not more demand, back up on the sliders and really go with where I'm being strong. Which line am I number one on? Where's my roast line by line that's a little better? Where's my ARE that's better? And so, as I said, and nobody gets into positive territory. It's how less negative are you with retained earnings. But revenues also, if you look at, I think, yeah, purple's like number 2, I think, yeah, in revenue, yes. And so you just look at revenue and say, okay, what do we have to work with here? And then that is where our costs come in terms of management on the supply side. And the sources of costs are something else. I want to quickly show you these are just some of my goofy handwritten scribbled notes. We have to spend tons and tons of time on the instructor side of analyzing this so we can generate different graphs and things for you to use in your papers and also comment on it. But one thing I always do just as a tip is I look at trends. I don't just look at past periods and what led up to this and what happened, but where's it going? Excuse me, in terms of, all right, this is loss towards inventory. You see right away, I always draw a 0 line just because that's our ideal. And then you look at the line and you say, look at family. Oh my gosh, everybody, green got in a little bit of trouble with building inventory, but look at how close everybody is to the 0 line. Everybody's doing really good in family, and that's a high revenue line and a mature line. But look at purple here. Purple's right exactly almost on low costs on the line between supply and demand. This is what we want to see. Closer the better. And there's a difference between bias and noise. That's the old target thing I try to draw. This is just not for you, but for my own mind. Bias is where you got a good grouping, but it's not on target. That's bias. It's like skew, okay? And that's basically what you would call inaccuracy. It's not accurate because it's not on the bullseye. But then noise it's all over the place. You might be centered really well around the center and you don't have any bias, but your dispersion, your overall consistency is not good. And what we can do statistically with Markov processes and looking at amplitude and frequency, and then of course the last thing is a trend, but we can actually see how much randomity is here. So how many of these decisions are like, I'm not sure what to do, let's just try this. That's a random, and that increases noise more than it does a bias. So we can see what's playing here and where are the curves going. And if you did enough here, you really would get a good idea of what were the decisions. But importantly, purples, look at this is great. This is a great trend on purple and are good in terms of building too much inventory and image, which got killed. Red got a little, our team leader got a little killed in a couple areas here of having excess inventory, but lost orders are uh, the real sin. When you have done a great job marketing, spent that money, and you can have high acceptance of the value chain by your customers, but then you lose them because you can't deliver them. That's the whole production side of this. And so we can see that in what, 3 out of 4? Yeah, this isn't too bad except for what I think our green friends that kind of dropped down here? I should actually have my one so I can see. Yeah, that's green. Green did dip get a little bit of lost orders, but I mean, come on, if you look at this group of the three that are basically number two, you can see that we're really close there. And red is building inventory and image, so they're gonna have to be careful of that because the trend is also up. Um, but you look at green and say, oh my gosh, they took a plunge here. What happened? Well, their trend is also up, and so is the trend in eco for purple. They did a fantastic job of they made some decisions saying, hey, we got to get our supply and demand balanced here. So it's still, how do you fix this in one period? You don't, it's hard. But in decision 5, you'll see some ways to handle inventory that because there's nothing to worry about next period, that really can scramble the order and you can end up the last team for 4 decisions, decision 5, they're number 2. I mean, that has happened. In fact, we even had one that was, well, it wasn't number 1, it was number 2 because yellow was so high in that other universe. But as far as gold universe goes, purple's doing great, making decisions, trying to get back to 0 here. So the decision process is fantastic. It shows how good teamwork works. And the one where they didn't have inventory or lost orders problems, they're still very flat. This decision took them a little bit into a tiny bit of lost orders, but not a lot. So just congratulations to all you did fantastically. Everybody's really close, and you can see why these 3 teams are kind of caught together because they're so close to 0 there. So it's a great inventory or a great indicator when you look at that compared to your EBITDA. You can look at this yourself, but what basically it shows, there's a graphic that shows that Purple did a fantastic job of balancing not only outsourced inventory, but getting their production matched with their inventory. But then what happened is that in eco-friendly, you can see this giant jump up here in terms of cost. So the unit cost in eco, um, there's pricing decisions and decisions made on the financial side that you can't necessarily, because of your cash flows, you can't balance supply and demand, but then not have the other part of the triangle, the price and the cost there, because you don't have a big installed base. So as much as they did really good at matching orders and sales, and if you looked at Purple's orders and sales, it's within this group, you'll see, wow, they really fixed orders and sales in all the lines really well. But then when it comes down to the unit cost, you have to spread it over a larger market share, or you end up being a cost outlier. And that's one thing that really hurt Purple is that they they their unit costs and eco-friendly and as well as their capacity used, not just the capacity that they had available in equal. This is the facility capacity here. But then you can say how much is it in eco-friendly being actually used. So that again is a subtle new other dimension of lost orders over inventory that you do have to look at. And I've included a lot more of these graphics this time, just so we can see what happened. And I could take each individual team. I don't want to make this, an hour-long video, so I'm going to wrap it up. But I did want to say congratulations to Red. They're still doing fantastic. If you look just at LOI and EBIT, my 2 favorites, and then ROS. Forget ARE, you're never getting a positive, but the ROS is yellow's ROS is mind-blowing. It's like 8%, and yet Team Red is 3.7%. So when you look at the financials for this period, let's see, I don't have my access. Team Yellow is 7.9 and blue is 5.9, red's 3.7. So our 3 center ROSEs, I mean, green is having an issue here, but in terms of, and we could see what happened with green. I mean, you can look at green, what happened in eco. Green got low cost, and eco got kind of killed on the cost side of that, and that cost side nailed their roast. So because the capital employed wasn't, the machine, the flywheel wasn't there, but yellow's doing fantastic here in terms of overall by company, and that's being driven by family and by image. They're doing a great job of family and image, and of course our leader, you can see red is not doing too bad there. They also have good strong revenues, and they have the second most important ARE. I mean, our course lead Paul and I argue about which is more important and which stacks it up. But if you look at ARE and then EBIT compared to LOI, that's what makes ARE so strong and important. So you can see that they're the least of the worst in ARE. So that's how they jumped ahead in terms of both capital utilization. Is there, is there, let's see, where is here's our leverage. Let's look at, here's Purple's issue. Leverage is a good thing if you're getting revenues and it's profitable revenues. It's like putting money in the basement, but you're losing money really quickly below the break-even point if you're using leverage. So leverage is the old curve of the higher the risks, the higher the return right up to bankruptcy. So we have to be really careful in terms of leverage is not a bad thing. You know, your debt to equity and how the ratio works if you're using it with a good flywheel, because that debt is being bought cheaper than what you can produce within your own flywheel. So it's a good thing. Every extra penny is an extra penny of EBIT in profit. So, but the problem with Ripple is they had to build up this leverage because of some cash destroying capital allocation decisions between supply and demand early on, and they've been fighting that ever since. So because you need the cash to keep on working, so you have to keep those loans going. And the one big difference in why, if you look at how are, you know, kind of green, yellow, and red, if you look how are they related, green and red have used leverage, but they've made it work with the revenues and the ROS and the that's saying, are we making good use of our leverage, or is it sinking us down? So there's nothing wrong with, you know, 30 to 50 some percent if you've got a good machine and a good flywheel. If you have a lot, but then you're not matching supply and demand in a couple lines, like is happening with image and with eco with purple, then that leverage is what's bringing you down, and not and just directly bringing your ROS down to a largest negative we have. So that's just one of the kind of factors between the amount that's able to be allocated to the supply side when you've built some good demand. All right, I've covered yellow, red's doing great. Blue's done great all throughout the whole EBIT. So if I just keep looking at EBIT, because each one of those EBITs tell a whole story in terms of how close everyone is and where people got into trouble. And green, for instance, got into trouble in eco and low cost. So if you look at the two coming portfolio items and then green and what their strategy has been, and this is a strategy course, you'll see that they did really well in the image and family, the cash intensive, high market share, good growth. But the future big growth investments in low cost and eco, supply and demand didn't match as well there. And so that's where you're multiplying a bad thing, because if you don't match that supply and demand and then you hit it with marketing with the accelerator, you're going to lose money faster. So that's where green got into a little bit of trouble here What am I saying? Where's the rows? Oh yeah, they are still negative in rows. So that's just, I want to make a point to green team and kind of what can you do about it in the future? Well, you got to look at low cost and you got to look at eco. What can purple do in the future? They've got to look at eco and image and say, you know, image is positive and a lot of money for everyone. What's happening with us in image? Well, there's a whole bunch of indicators. I put extra indicators for purple in here. It'll help you all because you'll see what to do and what not to do, but it'll help you purple to decide what you want to do with image and especially with eco because that you may want to back off in eco and do a couple different things in purple. I can't give it away, but you'll see right away when you look at the extra exhibits I put here, and everybody can see it, so it's not any special tips. But it will help you to watch that before decision 4 video with Paul and especially the before decision 5 because certain characteristics do not change from past inventory. And there's a trick and there's a secret about that because you have the old sliders still affecting the new sliders. And that's something that no one figures out because it's really subtle, including all of us instructors. We have to really dig in to see what's going on there. But there's a trick you can use in Decision 5 that brings everybody up into positive territory. And that's because you're not worrying about production for the next period because there's no period 6 in the 8-week course. Now we have a merger in the 15-week course. We have a lot of other things because we have mergers, international, and that stuff going on. But decision 5 is really important. Now we're coming up to decision 4, so watch those videos if you get a chance. Let's get out of this, stop share, and wrap up. Again, just go to Biz 485 and check it out to help with decision 4. Don't do any radical big changes for decision 4. You know, make smaller tweaks, even if you thought, oh my gosh, we did terrible in this and this is unexpected. Look at the trends because some of the trends are positive and say, oh, where the trends are positive, I should keep that up. Where the trends are negative, what did I do there that I don't want to continue? And you know, what that's got to do with it is the ratios and the leading versus the lagging indicators. You have to separate in your mind and in your analysis, is this a leading indicator or not? And the trend lines help you to figure that out. It's like, oh, okay, I can see what the leading indicators are here and where it's positive that I need to hit the gas. And I can see the lagging indicators as well as where the trend lines are off and I can hit the brakes there. But it's what we learn here, and this is a tip for your final presentation, is it's a dynamic process. So no one can solve a dynamic process because no one can know the future. We can just predict as far out as our headlights go. So the real key to this in terms of the dynamic part of it is that we do not want to be ahead of the trend. We do not want to be the first innovator that's ahead of all the trends and buys all that innovation costs, and then the trend takes a dip in the other direction. Do not be way ahead of the trend. Behind the, the trend, if you're way behind it, it's like the Alaskan buffer stick or the only the lead dog has a good view or something like that. I mean, you're in the exhaust basically of all the other jets. If you're behind the trend, you're constantly trying to catch up. And that's where cash flow comes in. You know, they say cash is queen, cash is king. Well, that's because if you get into cash flow problems, it's very difficult. So the real key is that balance in the middle, which is meeting the trend, figuring out where's it going to be and how can we position ourselves in our portfolio so they're with it and we're meeting it and we're getting all that value of it. And when you're programming these sims and trying to beat the sim, which is a fun thing that a lot of us like to do, and we never do it, but the real key to building those flywheels is meeting the trend rather than leading it too much or lagging behind it. So I'll leave you with that, and we will see you. And please look at the announcements and the comments because as we get closer to decision 5, I put more things in announcement than just at the beginning of the course. So please get the word out if you listen this far in the video, but there's a lot more tips and hints that I put in announcements than usually you might be just used to looking at announcements at the beginning of a week or a module or, you know, one of your periods. You might say, hey, look, is this the the time to look at the announcement, well, keep on looking because I keep adding other things as well as instructor added discussions to help you out. And again, message me, text me, email, connect up any way you want. Give me a call. If you're having any issues or problems, I'm happy to give you additional graphics that goes for everybody. And most importantly, as you're probably starting to see, how well you do in life and your course has all got to do with teamwork. So keep up the great teamwork. Another shout out to people, and because of your peer reviews coming in, I can see a lot of what's going on with the teams. Not just from who's texting me and who we're talking to, but how you're evaluating each other and how the team is working as a group. And that's really the purpose of the whole course as you get into business, to make it more real like the business life is. And our learners here are adults with careers. So this isn't all folks that have never worked in their lifetime, which we do have some in the ground schools, but there's people that are actually out working, have experience. So this will really help with your career growth, your CV, your resume, and also see what is the real world is all about our team. And if you get hired, you know, in the next few weeks as a CEO of a gigantic media company, remember the secret is watch your team. Hire a fantastic team and you can relax and have a lot of fun. You know, the team is everything because no one can be a CIO, CEO, CTO, do the whole C-suite. We all have to kind of divide our skills and apply them along with our fellow travelers. So see you